My interest has always been probably more in wildness than in wilderness. The danger in getting attached to wilderness is that it's finite, and wildness is infinite.
Connections in the landscape enable wildlife and people to thrive. But many of these important natural pathways have been broken or blocked by human activity. Larry Gullett is Executive Director of the Johnson County, Iowa Conservation Board.
80% of the landscape has been changed for agriculture and our cities, and so almost all of the natural habitat that we have left is concentrated along our stream corridors.
Wildlife cores are existing green spaces like parks or small forests where animals feel safe, and corridors are landscape connections used by wildlife to move between habitat cores.
In conservation, we recognize the rivers and streams as being migration routes and vestiges of habitat for fish and wildlife. We need to protect these corridors.
The water quality of our streams and rivers plays an important role in human and wildlife health. Mark Gannon is a farm manager and farm real estate broker in Ames, Iowa.
For some reason, I think about this stuff a lot and what we can do better. Rivers are dirtier than they ever were, and that's what we drink, and that's what we fish in, and that's what we recreate in. To me, we're the generation that knows the most and is doing the least.
The water quality has deteriorated largely due to development of our communities in intensive agricultural use without consideration for water quality. It's unsafe to drink it unless it's treated first.
Roger Ross Gipple founded Be Wild, Rewild, and Big River Connectivity is their vision to encourage a wilder, more beautiful, more biologically diverse, and more enduring Mississippi watershed.
The water quality issue affects everybody downstream, but it culminates in the Gulf of Mexico. You know, if you look at how big the Mississippi River watershed is, and then you look at where it goes, we're sending a lot of junk downstream.
Gipple thinks one answer to a healthier landscape may be a program focused on land that is difficult or impossible to farm.
As a farmer, in trying to figure out how cores and corridors would fit into Iowa, on my own land, I said, well, what land am I not getting any income of? If I am trying to farm it, what land is causing the most trouble in terms of soil and nutrient loss? Well, it was the steep slopes and the frequently flooding river bottoms. So I imagine something like the Wetlands Reserve Program. The land remained locally owned, and that it would remain on the tax rolls. There were some things an owner could do, but not derive income from agriculture. So it was going to be wild.
Landowner John Rummelhart is a participant in the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Wetland Reserve Program.
I think it's something like 90% of our total original wetlands are no longer with us. You just kind of wonder at what point does this kind of stop, or could you possibly make a difference?
Wetlands filter and purify water that people, fish, and wildlife depend upon. The WRP is a voluntary federal program administered by states. It provides a financial incentive to landowners who enroll land with wetland characteristics into a 30-year or permanent protection status. It also covers most or all costs associated with restoration.
The rivers are flooding more frequently, and the floods are worse than they used to be. It tips the odds in the favor of restoring the area to wetlands and let the river do what it wants to do in its floodplain rather than farming it.
Rumelhart has had land in the WRP for more than 2 decades.
Being on the land and bow hunting, you're sitting a lot in the same spots year to year. You're seeing the whole landscape slowly change, and it's quite an incredible thing to watch the transformation, not being farmed and really going back wild. Not the least of which is the wildlife coming back into a place they can actually be comfortable in. Probably the most profound thing about it is it's not for next year, it's not for 10 years, it's forever.
The Big River Connectivity Vision calls for bold new landowner funding programs to encourage the rewilding of 9 million acres in Iowa alone. Advocates think the plan will benefit people and wildlife and create connections.
When you look at what we spend on treating and providing safe water for people, it's extremely time-consuming and expensive. So if you live in a city, you need to be concerned about wetlands and water quality, if nothing else because it impacts your pocketbook.
We do a lot of good and not very much harm because we take the steep slopes and frequently flooding river bottoms and we leave the best land.
It's very easy to become disconnected from nature. I've never spent any time outdoors that I regretted. It has a health benefit in reducing stress and thinking about what's really important. And so creating some types of corridors where animals could migrate and move freely would be the right thing to do. It could have huge benefits for us and the environment, and it's strictly voluntary.
I think, especially the older I'm getting, the easier it is to be thinking of the future. And if one believes you should be the best steward of the land that you can be, it's important for me, but it's more important potentially for my kids. Inclined to think of legacy in the future, it's a great thing to be able to do.
Gipple thinks that rewilding steep slopes and frequently flooding river bottoms is an affirmation of human connections to the natural world.
All life has intrinsic value. But I would also say that the great hope of life is to be wild. And by that I mean self-reliant, spontaneous, self-willed, self-regulating, local, authentic, and free.
Why it's important to me is I somehow feel like I have a calling to try to do things the right way.
I think for a lot of people that do preserve and protect their property, there is a spiritual connection to the earth, but it may not be conscious. And what you start to recognize is that we're part of a community. And the community also includes all of the trees and all of the plants and all of the flowers. We're all part of one community.
We might not ever know all the good reasons why we should have the wetlands, but just knowing that they were here well before we ever were is enough of an answer for me, I guess.